Yes, welcome to our 8:30 date. Let's talk education. Thank you very much for joining. Let's see who the first in the room is going to be. We've got a lively discussion this evening. Oh, so we've got someone in the room already. We've got a few people in the room. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's do our obligatory shout outs. We are going to, as we do, I never get tired and never get bored of shouting out Little Scholars Playground. Little Scholars Playground is a hub for children's material. So we have books, we have posters, and they are absolutely amazing. So if you don't, I'll actually be insulted because we've been going for a good few weeks. I think we've been pushing 13 weeks. This was my promise to myself, just adjusting the camera. This was my promise to myself at the beginning of the year because I actually hate getting in front of the camera, despise it. And I said to myself, okay, Mr. Moore, it's time to kind of get out in front of the camera. And I've been promoting Little Scholars who were on our live, not last week, the week before. So they've been on for 13 weeks. So if you're not following Little Scholars now, if you're not following their page now, shame on you. Absolutely shame on you. I'm also going to give a massive shout out to Representation Matters. I'm waiting for their book. Thank you, Proud and Gifted. Give you a big shout out. I've got to learn to pin the comments. I'm going to give a massive shout out to Aisha Thomas, who launched her book, Representation Matters. We're going to be pushing that also on our live. We're going to be making sure, go on Amazon now, order it. It is an amazing book. She had a book launch, I think it was a few weeks ago, part of our Bristol crew. She's an amazing supporter and she does amazing work in the anti-racism space. So we're definitely looking forward to that. We've ordered ours on Amazon and we're waiting for it to come. The final shout out we are going to do and we're going to give is we are going Africa X5 United States of Africa board game. This is a brilliant board game. Guys, you've got half term coming up. I know sometimes we forget we've got half term coming up next week. So if you haven't kind of got activities planned for your children, that's an amazing board game that you can play with your children, looking at world and African history, looking at financial intelligence. So we are supposed to, yes, we see Leonidas Negus in the room. Respect my brother. Thank you. So we are supposed to have our guest on board. We're going to wait for her to join. We are supposed to have Zahra from No More Exclusions, an amazing organization, and she does some tireless work in the community. I don't know how she does it. So we're going to wait for her to join. But I don't know why this always happens. It always happens either just before I'm about to do a live or just after I'm about to do a live. Before we kind of bring her in, I'm going to wait for her to come in. I'm in a bit of a pensive mood. I'm a bit of a funny one today, because I'm not sure if you've seen, I've done a reel on my page. Okay, so there was a news story over the weekend. I saw it over the weekend. I purposely didn't post. I didn't say anything about it, about the little boy in, I think it was Swansea. Where can I get the board game Africa X5 TV? Go to their page. I'm sure somebody's going to be kind enough to post it there. Africa X5 TV. Brilliant, guys. So back to the story. I saw a story about a little boy in Swansea. I saw it posted on loads of people's pages. Loads of people's pages. We've got Zahra in the room. So I'm just going to finish this off and then I'm going to invite Zahra on board. But I saw this story and I was like, do you know, I'm so traumatized. I don't even think I can talk about it. I didn't post it, and a few people were like, I didn't post. And then I saw something else. And I'm going to discuss this with Zahra as I invite her on as well, because I know this is one of the things that she's definitely going to want to talk about. Let me pop her an invite now. About another, thank you. Thank you very much for joining. Zahra, welcome. I'm going to give you the welcome you deserve. Thank you very much. It's taken me a while to get you on our live. And before you even speak, I'm gonna be honest with you. Zahra is one of my biggest inspirations because, as I said, I didn't come on live. I didn't like putting my face out there, and Zahra's pushed me into the forefront because Zahra never takes no as an answer. Zahra is a true inspiration. From No More Exclusions, she started this from the grassroots. She doesn't like praise. Look, that's why she's moving back from the camera. From grassroots, from nothing. And this has become, I'm not sure if you saw an article this week in the Guardian on about the things that she does, because she doesn't like us to focus on her. It's about the work and the ethics. So when we're talking about people who are grassroots, who are doing it from the ground, who aren't about the glitz and the glamour, this is something we're talking about. So Zahra Bay from No More Exclusions, welcome. Please tell the audience and those in the room, tell us a bit about yourself and tell us a bit about No More Exclusions.
First of all, can you hear me okay? Because this is my first live, is it?
Yes, we can hear you fine and we can see you fine.
Okay, all right. Well, first of all, that's an amazing introduction. Thank you so much, Ziggy. And likewise, what you've done with More Education. I watch your videos. I keep up with your news. I am so impressed. You go out, you get out and about. I saw you traveling up to Bristol to meet some of the boys, taking them out. And that's what educators are supposed to be doing. So big love to you. Big love to you. Big respect to you. And to all educators, all particularly Black educators out there who are doing it. And trying to do it in spite of all the challenges and the barriers and the hating and the policies, right? And the news that keep on coming. The news today as well. So I heard a little bit earlier on that you were talking about today's news. Maybe we'll come back around to that.
Yeah, let's come back to that because I think if we talk about it, I'll get angry. So tell us who you are. Tell us about your educational past and tell us about No More Exclusions, please. That's where I want to hear about you. I want to hear about your educational journey.
So I'm just a teacher and a very angry, disgruntled, recovering teacher. I'm very pissed off, and I am unapologetic about my anger at the way things are, the way education is going, and the way in particular that Black, working class, disabled children, neurodiverse children are being treated all of the time. And this is historical. The historical exclusion, the marginalization, isolation, but also the way in which the curriculum is under assault. BTECs, if it wasn't for a BTEC course, I wouldn't have made it to uni. If I hadn't made it to uni, I wouldn't have become a teacher. If I hadn't become a teacher, I wouldn't be talking to you now. I wouldn't be doing my PhD and so on. So I can't stress how important vocational courses, BTEC courses are. And I'm also someone for whom English is not the first language. Okay. I'm someone who came here at the age of 16. Someone who never worn a uniform a day of her life. And I did, wow. Okay. You can get through an education without wearing uniforms, and all this obsession with conformity. I just don't get it in England. What else can I tell you?
So hold on. You said you came here from, tell us a bit about your background. Where did you come from?
I grew up in Rome. Okay. My heritage is Somali and Italian, and those who know their history will know the colonial ties between countries, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in Italy, but then I spent twice as long here. I've been here 30 years this year, actually, 30 years in this country, in London. I don't know if I can say country because I feel like London is the country I've lived in. I don't know much else other than yeah. And
England's a separate thing. So you said you went down, you came into the country, BTEC, so on and so forth, got into and started teaching. Tell me about your teaching experience when you started, because that's how we met. We met in teaching in a Peru in East London. So tell me about your teaching experience.
Right. So actually, I always say this, but it's so true. and it starts with my mom. If it wasn't for African women, Black women, I wouldn't be here. And all along the pathway, it's been women, Black women who've encouraged me, in particular women of color and Black women in particular, who've encouraged me to literally at every turn, every time I had to make a major decision, there'd be a Black woman or woman of color like advising me. And so I went into teaching because one Jamaican woman from Streatham, shout out to Maxine, said to me, Zahra, after I did my business degree, she's like, what are you going to do with yourself? And I was like, actually, I don't really like, I don't want to go into the world of business. She was like, you'd make a really good teacher. And I thought, surely not me. And she's like, you really would. You should think about it. And so I remember I had missed the deadline for that year. So it gave me more time to, you know, apply, really read about it, think about it. Anyway, I applied. I got into Kingston, and that was 1990s. And things were very different in the 90s. But anyway, I did that. I didn't find it easy. I did feel like there was a lot of adjustments to be made to get into this profession. But anyway, I made it through. And the first job I applied, I got it. I taught in Enfield. My first job as an NQT in a large kind of comprehensive mainstream school. Yeah. And then I stayed there for 8 years. I started as a business teacher in NQT. Second year, I was an assistant head of department for citizenship, RE, and PSHE. By the fourth year, I was a head of department of the largest department in the school. And then by the 7th and 8th year, I was burnt out. And I was like, I'm ready to get out of this. Like, this cannot be what education is about. And also, I was beginning to see that actually schooling and education are not the same thing.
Say that again. Say that again. That was a big one. Schooling and education is not this. Just say that again, please.
It's not the same thing. You can get an education without going to school, without going to college, without going to university. You can, you know, we know, you and I know lots of scholars, lots of people are educated, who are educated fools, but also we know people who, you know, haven't traditionally been trained or like got qualifications, but they've got knowledge that some of us can only aspire to have, and wisdom that goes with that. So so kind of that was my trajectory. And I suppose I didn't even make it to 10 years. About 7 or 8 years into it, I literally overnight decided, like, this can't be right. Me leaving my house and my son, you know, at breakfast club 7 in the morning, collecting him again 7 at night, never seeing him, feeling really inadequate as a parent, you know, having to be present in all these bullshit meetings, bullshit, tasks that we were given, which I felt were institutional duties more than duties to the community, to the children, to the parents. And I just didn't want to abide by that. So, yeah, I resigned overnight without knowing where I would be going, without a job or anything, with a mortgage and a child as a single mom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I did a post the other day about teachers, and 5 years tends to be about the breaking point. 5 years tends to be roughly around the breaking point where teachers are just disappearing from their profession. And I know we speak as teachers, and we know that sometimes the only pleasure we actually get is being in the classroom with the children. Everything outside of that can just be soul destroying. So you left the school in Enfield, and I'm assuming that's when you went into when we met in that crazy crew in East London.
Do you know, I'm so grateful for that crew, because that's how I got to meet you. I got to meet Sheila. I got to meet Leah. Shout out to Leah, she's watching. And above all, the young people, you know, like Elaine, Jerry, and like so many others, right? That many of whom we're still in touch with to this day, you and I, right? But many of whom, sadly, we're not. And that kind of like feeds into the work that NME does. Some of them we've had to go and visit in prison. And some of them are not alive. And that's just the sad truth of what's at the root of the motivation, right, of this work.
So what? And I don't think oftentimes people even realize the reality. So, for example, I was on. Went to the dry cleaners. I think it was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday was Monday, and I saw a former student from institution, a pro I used to work in. And the first thing was like, "Oh, sir, didn't you hear what happened? Didn't you hear what happened to X student?" And as he said it, my stomach drops. I'm thinking, "Oh, please," because you kind of almost know what the story is going to be. You with me? And I'm thinking, and it sounds horrible. It sounds bad, yeah. But I was hoping for option B, i.e., option A was he's dead, or option B was he's in prison. Yeah. And because when you see students, especially from proofs, because we know what the timeline is, we know what happens, we know the statistics. And he said, "Oh yeah, he's got 5 years and this, that, and the other." And is it bad for me to say I was almost relieved that that's what he said, as opposed to him being dead?
Yeah, I often say it that, you know, I, this is how absurd, right? Absurd, obscene things have got over time. It's that we have to be relieved when someone that we know is in prison, one of our ex-students in prison from the Peru, as opposed to not alive, you know,
Yeah.
not with us. So, and that's the reality. And people think, oh, this is catastrophizing. It really isn't.
Yes,
It really
reality.
isn't, because education is schools, being in schools. Let's leave education out because it is a contentious term, but whether schools can provide an education to all of our children, young people, is another subject. But schooling, as messed up as schools are, as problematic as they can be, as violent and toxic, they still represent a protective factor in young people's lives.
Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
between the hour and that hour, you can say they're here, they're with their peers. Supposedly they're in a place where they have access to opportunities, learning opportunities, you know, socialization and so on. When you remove that from a child's life, you're literally putting a rag from under their feet.
Yeah.
Initially, what a lot of the young people that I speak to now that I'm a researcher, and I speak to them all the time, they'll say, when I first got excluded, I was like, yeah, this is nice. I'm at
Yeah.
home. You know, it's a
Yeah.
little bit like when we went into lockdown, if you remember. People were like, well, I
Yeah.
definitely was. Like, this is nice. You know, I can just stay in my slippers. I can be at home. But then after a
Yeah.
while, you realize actually you do, this isn't so good. Actually, you miss your friends, you miss your peers, you miss being out with people. You're starting to feel like actually the pressure on your mental health, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the young people talk about exclusion in the following terms. This is the language they've used. It's a stain that you can't wash away. It's a scar, right? It's pulling us back instead of pushing us forward. It's like giving us bad credit before we've even begun with our lives. This is the kind of language they use when I ask them about how do you feel about this exclusion thing. Obviously, not everybody ends up in prison, but we know that at least 61 to 63% will somehow get entangled with the criminal justice system. That's a
With the
fact.
criminal justice system.
That is a fact. And there's always proximities. So even the young people, again, from the research and the lived experience, and it's all around us, right? In the work that we do, in the research that I'm doing, the young people will say, even if it didn't happen to me, it happened to literally everyone I know. Everyone I know,
Yeah.
that's what's happened to them. You know,
So
we
hold on. Stick a pin.
yes,
So this was the experience. How long were you in the Pru in East London? Because I think I left there 2012-ish. How long were you there until when I met you at a random conference? Big up Jason. Big up Jason for Jason Awansi for taking me to that conference. Otherwise, we would have never, ever met. So, 2012. To what point did you kind of? Because I remember you saying you were in the Peru and you started to hear all of these stories. You started to understand these statistics and became a bit disillusioned. So, when did you kind of shift from working in the Peru, thinking you're helping, to kind of where we are now with no more exclusions?
Yeah, so remember, I was already disillusioned with the mainstream system. So I already
Yeah.
knew this mainstream gig is not working for me.
Yeah.
And it's not working for a lot of my colleagues were leaving one by one. A lot of them were like shutting down shop and moving to teach abroad or leaving teaching altogether. Yeah. So mainstream, like I knew, was making people ill. All right. So this is not to say that everything was hunky-dory mainstream, but anyway, went into the Peru, I suppose, via the new arrival center, which was kind of an alternative provision. So before I got to the Peru, I was in an alternative provision for 3 years, where also very problematic, where you had year 11 students from other countries who have arrived in the UK, and schools don't want them. Why they don't want them? They bring down the exam results. Nobody wants a student in year 11, never mind their human right to an education, right? We're going to send them to these enclosures, these educational enclosures, right? As Adam Sojourners called them. So what I found there was poor provisions, terrible facilities, very limited curriculum, a lot of unqualified staff, or if the staff were qualified, were kind of like on precarious contracts, so they're not really there. They're not really there with
invested. They're not invested.
They're not. They haven't got continuity, so they might be qualified, but they're not there permanently. So there's high turnover of kids, high turnover of staff, terrible facility and environment, just a really bad combination, right? For like, if you can call social justice and any of that social justice in education. And then from there, ended up at the Peru, where I stayed for 8 years. And I think I met you in the very early days of my times at the Peru. Like the first couple of years is when I met you. And I remember it was just after the riots, the
2011, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, what can we say about the Peru, really? There's so much to be said about it. What do you think would be useful?
Okay, so, gosh, we kind of spoke about what our experience, because I don't think a lot of people really understand this environment of because over the years I've kind of dipped in and dipped out. I don't know, I always kind of get dragged in there because to me this is where you're dealing with the raw issues with children in our community. Because in London, let's be honest, in London, as we know, Zahra knows the statistics, in the Prus, they're mainly black children, and they're mainly going to be the majority of, I think it's black boys are 4 to 5 times, depending on the borough, more likely to be excluded than any other type of children. Black girls, if I get it wrong, Zahra, tell me, 3 times more likely to be excluded depending on the borough. So you have, this is where a lot of our children are. And I think Fran says it, learning difficulties and disabilities not assessed early enough. So you've got a lot of children there who, Fran inspires, that was a brilliant comment, who have undiagnosed learning difficulties. A lot of the stuff that I'm facing now and seeing, especially after COVID, are children with social emotional issues, where schools, whether they don't have the capacity, they don't care, they're just dashing those children out. So we're seeing that. We're seeing it. It's crazy. And I don't know how you did 8 years, to be honest with you, because as I said, I've always dipped in and dipped out. I might spend a year, 2 years, go back to mainstream, so on and so forth. So you did 8 years. So after 8 years, was there one thing that kind of caused you to say, nah, and leave the Peru, or was it just a build-up of things?
No, to be honest, if I hadn't been made redundant, I would probably be there. I got very attached to those kids, to those young people. And I felt like someone has to provide some continuity in these lives, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying this in like savioristic terms, but necessary terms, that to me, children and young people that I teach, they're not just somebody else's child. They become like my own children. And this has always been my attitude, that we have to treat other people's children sometimes even better than the way we treat our own, right?
Yeah.
And especially in those circumstances, because of all the things that you described, people don't just end up having like this experience, this educational experience out of nowhere, oftentimes is really turbulent, like backgrounds, right? When you look at family setup, when you look at undiagnosed disabilities, and the harm and trauma that all of that causes, poverty, definitely, you know, like socioeconomic disadvantage for a fact. So put all those things together. And then violence, you know, there's a lot of talk about the violence, you know, the violence, youth violence. Listen, society is violent. Society is violent. So society gets the citizens it deserves, the children and young people it deserves. Wow. So it's really high time that we stop pinning the responsibility on children, young people, right, alone. And really look at the way the entirety of society kind of like is organized around violence, whether it's gender violence, whether it's economic violence, social violence, historical violence. Look at the violence of the police. Look at the violence, the social services, right? Look at the violence that, like, even the department, like, for the way that they withhold benefits from people.
Yeah.
And people kind of like forced to take their own lives on the back of that. So we live in a very violent society. And then you put young people, children and young people, because children are being excluded, particularly Black children as young as 4 and 5, in these settings with many, many others that have difficult lives. And often it is the exclusion, actually, that is the most difficult thing that's happened to them. Up until that point, when you look at the profile, and this is important, when you look at the profile of the average excluded white child and the average excluded Black child, they're very different. Like the average excluded Black child is less likely prior to the exclusion to have had a diagnosis of special educational needs and disability, to have had any dealings with the criminal justice system, to have actually to be on free school meals, to be in care. So it's the exclusion that kind of is the catalyst in their life, as we've seen with you know, like serious case reviews, Tashon Aird from Hackney, Jaden Moody from Waltham Forest, and there's others, right?
Well, actually, I overheard a student speaking to another student today in a Peru, and she said, she was in essence saying, get out of here as soon as possible. Pretty much mirrored what you said. She was like, get out of here as soon as possible. Everything in my life was okay before I came to this place, and now I can't get out. And like almost she started listing all of the things that have kind of gone wrong, and the poor decisions that being in that environment, because she's with a certain group of children, you're forced to do certain things, the ideas, it's just all gone wrong. And she'd seen a new student. She's like, listen, this place isn't cool. This is not a cool place to be. Do not do or go down the road I can see you going down. And don't get me wrong, the girl who was speaking to the other one is one of the most difficult girls, but she's fully cognizant and aware of the environment that she's in. So that is sad. Okay, so we get on to our No More Exclusions. Talk to us about this powerful, radical, grassroots movement called No More Exclusions. Talk to us, because I'm not sure if many of the people in our chat are aware. I know, although I've been there from the inception, I support as best as I can. It's one of the hats that I do try and wear, and I've been brilliantly informed. I'd love you to tell us more about what we do.
Yeah, so it all started at that, I suppose it started at that famous conference that you and I, right, at South Bank Uni. It was October 2018. The conference was called State Racism, Collusion and Resistance. I remember it was organized by Stafford Scott.
Yeah, big up Uncle Stafford for that. Big up Uncle Stafford.
Always. And I remember Temi Mwale, who's become a friend, was there from Forefront Project. I remember Professor Gus John was there. Kane De Andrew was there. Rani Mead was there. Jengba, Joint Enterprise Not Guilty by Association was there. Inquest, Death in Police Custody was there. People from Windrush was there, and people talking about Grenfell. So it was a weekend, if you remember, and it was panel after panel, speaker after speaker. I remember David Lammy was there, and they nearly ran him off stage. I remember that.
Yes. Yeah. We stuck it on him. We stuck it on him. I remember. Yes.
And it was speaker after speaker talking about race disparities, right across society, whether it's education, whether it's prison sentencing, whether is school exclusions, whether it's, you name it. Talk about the curriculum and just justice denied, right? Instance of, all these inquests. I remember Imran Khan, the lawyer of the Stephen Lawrence family, talking about the very famous McPherson report that came out in 1999, right? With 71 recommendations, and 20 years later, only 9 had been implemented, right? And I was just like, I could see, if you remember, people were getting vexed in that crowd. After 2 days of listening to this, right? To all of these kind of like examples of systemic racism, state violence, right, enacted, and the way in which organizations collude, right? The state, actually, state workers and institutions collude, as well as NGOs, I would say, right? Like, you've got the whole equality industrial complex, but anyway.
A great example, if you don't really understand of how that works, would be, and this is why the child Q case would be so interesting, how the school and the Metropolitan Police came together tacitly without any discussion to dehumanize a teenage girl. So when we're talking about organizations, state organizations working together and colluding, this is what we're talking about. So sorry to interrupt. I just had, because I've still got that thing on my mind.
Thank you for, you're right. You're right to clarify these things. So exactly, state institutions that taxpayers fund, we're literally funding our own oppression right about now, right? And we've been doing this historically. So at that conference, I think towards the end of that weekend, the mic was going around and it landed where we were sat, do you remember? And I didn't have a question, and I actually didn't even have a comment, to be honest. Mine was a call to action. I was just like, I'm just a teacher. I've been teaching at this PRU. They're pushing me out to redundancy anyway. I can see that I am upholding the school to prison pipeline, and worse, school to prison to cemetery, and all these different outcomes, to mental health, you name it, right? To poor life chances, because that's what we're talking about. And I don't want to collude. I don't really want to be part of the collusion. So I just said to the audience, my question, my call to action wasn't even to the panelists. My thing was, does anyone else feel like they would like to come together and see what we can do? Some way of channeling all this anger and frustration that we're all feeling. And that day, 54 people came forward. They gave me their phone number. We set up the first No More Exclusion WhatsApp group, and then we went from there.
All right, stop. I'm going to stop you there, because I needed you to say that. I needed you to simply say, I went to a conference, I was inspired, I stood up, and I said, who's on it? Pretty much. Who's down? Can you just, well, I know you're not gonna, this is the bit I know you're not gonna want to do. Yeah, you're gonna be all self-deprecating and blah blah blah. So that was October 2018. This is during lockdown. Could you just kind of just give some bullet points of some of the things that No More Exclusion have done since then? So some of the highlights of No More Exclusion. So I'll kick you off. How many chapters across the country are there currently?
So there's Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester. Yeah, and then there's various bits going on in London as well.
And London. So there's 4 chapters. In regards to the motion to the National Education Union, which I know was a big thing. Could you just explain what, because when people speak about action, and this is something that No More Exclusion is talking about, policy, how to attack policy, research. What was one of the things, what was the key thing that was put to the NEU, the National Education Union, about exclusions, and they backed it? And you've been applying pressure to the government, serious pressure.
So I just want to shout out actually Ligali, Toy Nagbetu, another one of my mentors, right? Yeah. And advisors, who at the beginning of the pandemic, we were discussing, you know, how do we put the case forward in policy terms, that, you know, if we're going to be talking about vulnerable children need to be in school, key workers children need to be in school, we also need to talk about not excluding. Yeah, we can't be hypocrites. And I remember Toyin saying, when we are researchers, we're both at UCL. Toyin has got his PhD now, big up to him. At that time, he was finishing it off. And I'm still in that struggle. But he was like, look, we're researchers, we're educators and researchers. We need some data to back up this call for this moratorium. And what a moratorium means, in simple terms, just means a legal ban on exclusions, right? Which we thought during a pandemic, surely it's not a difficult case to make, right? All these different emergency measures have been put in place. Surely we can put an emergency measure in place to protect the most vulnerable, right? So we went about, the first thing we did, we spent 6 months doing freedom of information requests to schools. We wanted to get a picture. Our schools up and down England excluding. And we gathered that data. We put together a moratorium report, which is on the website. And then on the base of that, we wrote a motion. We campaign around districts. I mean, I'm making it sound really simple, but it's not easy to convince teachers. A lot of teachers are very wedded to exclusion, pandemic or not, right? Exclusions were still happening. So we can do this double talk of vulnerability one moment, but yet we still need to exclude the same kids we said are vulnerable. And this is the environment in which we're trying to maintain our sanity, I would say, in England, right? It is difficult sometimes. So anyway, we took that motion after building support from the grassroots at local level through districts up and down the country. We managed to take it to annual conference last year, and we managed to get a vote of 94% in favor of a moratorium. And that caused a big uproar, actually. Huge uproar.
Huge.
Yeah.
So it was in the national newspapers. If I remember, we also wrote a letter to the, I want to say, State of Education, Secretary of Education. Is that correct? Am I correct?
Yeah.
Am I getting it wrong?
Yeah. We wrote to both Gavin Williamson and Zahra as well, both of them.
In regards to putting a pause to exclusions. Now, the reason why I say that is because I don't know what it is about our community. We're very hot on protesting. We're very, very, very hot. We love, let's go out and this, that, and the other. And there's a place for it. But strategic work, as you said, it wasn't easy. It's hard. A lot of research, a lot of data. What No More Exclusion is doing is pushing to change policy. Policy. Yep. Not out here to make noise. That's why maybe a lot of people in the room may not have heard of No More Exclusion. Certain people in certain circles, because don't get me wrong, Zahra can tell you about some of the Twitter beefs that's gone off, and she'll come and tell me, and I just want to go and punch someone up. You with me? But that's not the professional thing to do. That's not the professional thing to do. I take that back. But the policy change and impact over the 4-year period has been the most phenomenal thing I've ever seen, part of any organization I've ever been part of. And as a community, I put a reel out earlier on about we have to do something. And it's not just about going out and physically doing something. It's about putting in that grassroots work. Let's get this straight. Nobody doesn't know. Zahra barely sleeps. Yeah? Zahra gives her time to the organization. Zahra, I'm gonna talk your business. You can beat me up afterwards, yeah? as Zahra was made redundant and has been doing this voluntarily, yeah, for a good while, and has put a lot of her time, money, and effort into this. So when we talk about grassroots commitment to our children and changing lives, this is actually what we're talking about. And as you said, it took for you standing up in 2018 and saying who's on it to where we're at now. So I just wanted to kind of give you your flowers. I know you hate them and you're going to take them and you're going to throw them back in my face, but I had to give them to you. Yeah, because we talk about change and we talk about revolution and we talk about all of these things, but they're just concepts, but we're talking reality now. So in regards to no more exclusion, those are some of the amazing things they've done. What kind of are the next steps are we looking for from no more exclusion? What are we hoping for? What are we pushing for?
So first of all, what I want to say is that what no more exclusion is doing is a current iteration of a very long struggle,
yeah,
of the Black parent movement in this country and Black educators. Like, we're not the first to be saying the things that we're saying. And there's people like Cheryl Phoenix, you know.
Yeah. Big up Cheryl.
Big up Cheryl. She's in Ghana at the moment. What's his name? The Communities Empowerment Network. Big up to them. 1999, Jerry German, and Gus John is still the chair. Like, this is part of a long struggle, and then you go back to Bernard Cord, and you know, and how the West Indian child was made education normal, and how that whole campaign built. Again, that was built on parents coming together with educators and saying, we need data, we need research to change policy. And that book was supposed to be a call to action. It is a call to action, actually. If you read the book, it's only 50 pages, and it's been reprinted this year for the 50th anniversary, right, since the publication. It's a call to action, particularly to Black parents. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I've got mine.
Yeah, if you don't have it,
got mine here. Eat this, everybody. Get it.
This wasn't planned, by the way. This is something that, as educators, Black educators, you have to have read this. Because if you haven't read this, if this isn't the foundation of what you do, your foundation might be a bit shaky. So, sorry, Zahra, I just had to throw that in.
And also, for people that like to know the history of what I'm talking about as well, get yourself Stella Datsi's Heart of the Race. And in chapter 2, it's all about the charting, archiving, you know, how Black women in particular in education have been at the forefront of this struggle, always, you know. Black mothers, aunties, grandparents, dads, this is not a new thing. So that's the first thing to say. So it's important. Why policy? Okay, so the reason why policy is important, and I know Cheryl feels the same. I'm not the only one who kind of, Gus John, I had this conversation with him as well. Like, policy is so important because policy is what shapes actions that happen within institutions. And so the law needs to change. Like, the starting point for NME was we wanted to outlaw school exclusions. They are not legal in other countries. They don't exist as a concept in other countries.
Hold
For
on.
example,
stick a pin.
Yes.
Sorry, what did you just say?
That the legal power to exclude that the head teacher has in England does not exist in other countries. This whole concept, this whole industry that is built, because it is an industry that is built around exclusion, does not exist. Schools in other countries find other ways to deal with children. They find in-house ways to deal with children who have quote unquote challenging behavior. And I say quote unquote because what might be challenging to me as a teacher might not be challenging to you, Ziggy, right?
Yeah.
There's a great deal of elasticity to that term, to what does disruptive. And don't get me wrong, I'm not denying that challenging behavior does exist in schools. I fully acknowledge it. I lived there. I was a teacher for 20 years. I'm talking as a teacher and as a mum, right, who's raised 2 kids, not 1. So it does exist. But if we take school exclusions off the table altogether, what then? What would we be left with? We would have to be left with, these kids can be chucked away. We can't put them on the scrap heap no more. We would then be forced to think about, what now? What do we do instead, right? We would
So
really have
a
to
complete rethinking of the issue.
right.
Yeah, I'm with you. You know, I
But
didn't know that it was in
we're
this
not,
country that it was done. Sorry, go on.
and I just want to say that, like, the law is really important. So in terms of what NME is trying to do, we want to see law change. In the same way that, you know, like hitting kids in schools, what was it called? Caning.
Yeah.
That was outlawed in the 80s. In the same way, nobody would ever dream of saying, bring caning back. Well, people say it, but it's not going to happen, right? And that is deplorable. Nobody wants their children to be hit by teachers anymore.
Yeah.
That's just a cultural paradigm shift that we've had in this country, and in, I would say, the rest of Europe. And the Western world. It's not like that globally. That's the same thing we want to see with exclusion. We want to see a cultural shift. So we're not pinning all our dreams of liberation and freedom on law change, but we recognize that law is important, policy is really important, but ultimately it's a cultural shift we want. So and this is important to close, and that is to say that even if the law never changes, we want educators to say, do you know what? I don't care what the law says, what powers I have or I don't have. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
These are our children. We're gonna have to think. We're gonna have to be creative about what we do. But one thing we're not doing is that we're not exiling them, and we're not putting them on the scrap heap. And that's it. So that's what we're working towards.
I love it. Love it. Brilliant. No, it is, and I can tell you, I would have assumed I came from a fairly I've spoken about my past, fairly kind of radical background, but my time kind of coming to the meetings, speaking with different, has really kind of shifted my mind in regards to what change really looks like. And I know we spoke about it at the beginning, and I kind of, as we begin to wrap up, to kind of explore how these ideas link to a lot of the work that you do. So I was speaking about a recent, well, I should have said, I think it happened in December 2020. I was reading the article, but I can't get my head around this. Another girl, I said, in the last 3 weeks, there have been, last fortnight, I've seen 3 stories come out about black children of color who have been under attack. There was one over the weekend with the little boy. I didn't post, I didn't do anything because it was too traumatic. I saw everybody posting. Many of us said nothing. We have to keep my mouth shut. There was a youth in Bristol where adult bust his head open. Yeah. I don't know if you saw it. If you saw it in the chat, yes. Again, I didn't comment on that. I didn't comment because, interesting, it was the weekend I came back from Bristol. I was going to spin my car around because this is the mentality I don't come from policy. I need to learn. You with me? Go around and bust someone's head. But the final one was, again, today. Another teenage girl, 14-year-old autistic girl, strip searched by the Metropolitan Police. I'm not going to go into any more kind of detail because it's so kind of depraved and disturbing, the actual details. I thought the Child Q one was, but this, I don't want to compare. But this is why the work that we do, or that you do, is so important. I just kind of, before we wrap up, I just want to kind of, did you get the chance to read the story, Zahra? I know you.
I unfortunately did. Yes, I did.
Just kind of your kind of view on these issues, because they're not isolated. People think they're isolated incidents. They're not isolated incidents. They are not isolated. These are just the ones we hear about.
No, they would like us to believe, those in power and authority would like us to believe that these are isolated incidents, that it's one bad apple. They're absolutely systemic and endemic. But I think what's happening more is that, you know, people are coming forward more with video, with footage. You know, they're reporting them more, and they're just using the court of, like, public opinion, I suppose, through social media, right?
Yeah.
to kind of get interest, because actually if it wasn't for social media, mainstream media wouldn't touch these stories. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. If people weren't uploading their videos on TikTok, on Twitter, social media, mainstream media, the Independent, the Guardian, BBC would not be picking up these stories. Why? Because they affect Black, disabled, working class children, and who cares about them, right? So there is that. So I just feel like these things haven't just started happening. I just think that they come into the fore now because of the way in which I think we're all becoming more, even me, look at me tonight with social media, first time doing a live. We are learning to use technology, right? To amplify our story, our counter narratives, because there are master narratives and we have to put forward counter narratives. So that's so important to all of this.
No, 100%. And sorry, go on. Sorry, Zahra.
I think the second thing I want to say about this, first of all, my heart got, as a parent, like as an auntie, these things, I mean, I don't know how much more we can take, I'll be honest. You know, I just feel like we should, I don't understand how people aren't writing on a daily basis about these things, how we can't just show outrage, you know, on social media. I think we need to move beyond that. We need to move beyond that.
Yeah, this is why for me, and I think as part of almost my cathartic process, I said, I think I discussed with you when the original Child Q thing happened, yeah? I think I've discussed with you and a few people, because I knew what I would have done, because I knew the school. I knew what school it was. I knew what school it was instantly. Yeah, I've got no problem. Like, statistically, the way I was supposed to end up in prison anyway. You with me? So I've done 40 years and I ain't done a long stretch. So if it means doing it for a child, you with me? And not my own ego, but something. Because the social media outrage and this, that, and the other is too much. And what I was saying is, what I realize is, as a community, the serious, difficult, boring, I'll be honest, the boring work that you spoke about, that the reading and writing of policies to really make some change. There are a number of different things. But as I've heard, protest is just one arm. It's just one kind of element of it. And if we really don't become strategic in what we do and really start to think about it, I see our children being at huge risk because we're not protecting them. It's almost they're vulnerable to everybody.
I mean, there's a need for all of these things that you've mentioned, all these strategies, you know, I think. Writing letters, signing petitions, you know, as well as protesting. And yeah, I mean, using our voice in every possible way, whether it's in the written form, you know, through the arts as well, in every way that we can, I think, really. And also not suppressing anger. It's really important that people don't suppress their anger when it's righteous, you know. It's righteous. And actually we have a duty as parents, as aunties, as teachers, as neighbors. We have to advocate. We have to use our voices. We can't say, well, okay, let's wait, you know, maybe this was a mistake. I've read people say, as always, let's hear both sides. You know, there are no two sides to this injustice. There's just no two sides to it. So wrong is wrong. Wrong is wrong. As far as like what can we do? I mean, I'd really want to encourage people to not hide anger, not suppress it, and just find ways to channel it. You know, really important.
I always encourage. I've seen a few people. I've seen. I'm not sure if Davis from Manhood Academy Global is here. There are a lot of community organizations. There are so many No More Exclusions. You've introduced me to doing so much amazing work, and we don't seem to want to plug in and support. We've mentioned the likes of Cheryl Phoenix and so on and so forth, yeah. And I'll be honest, I get vexed. One of the reasons, and I remember having this conversation with you early on, and I know you push me back, and I know we differ on this one, yeah, in regards to money, in regards to support, because you've got people like you who are out there doing work, doing serious work. Because when issues like this come up, you lot are some of the first people to get the calls. Oh, my child. No, my child. Oh, you've been excluded. And I see like Auntie Jay and everybody, yeah, we all kind of fly into action, and you with me? Let's go and support. But when it comes to time to, because not everybody can go to a protest, but you can support financially, you can support with your, you can support with your, all of these things. But if we really don't start backing the organizations who are out there doing work, yeah, listen, it's gonna be, and with all the things that are happening economically, we've got families, and let's be honest, our families, we've always been the bottom of the pile socio-economically. We're gonna get affected first. We're always gonna be affected first. And out here, it's looking sticky. It's looking terrible. And if we really don't begin to strategize, the next 2 years are gonna be appalling. Really appalling. There are so many people out there doing work, but it's only when catastrophes like this hit the forefront or hit the news when we decide, oh, Zahra, you with me? Oh, Davis, oh, Cheryl Phoenix. They've been there for time doing the work, but nobody don't want to throw them no money, or how can we support, or this, that, and the other. So I think that was my rant over, Zahra. I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna say thank you very much. This is your first live. Amazing. It's been brilliant speaking to you. We've had so many comments, but I've been so deep in a conversation, I haven't been able to kind of address all of them. So I wanted to say thank you. Is there anything you wanted to depart and say to your adoring fans before you disappear?
I haven't got fans. Stop being silly. All I want to say to people is that we can't wait for change to come from the top, because it's not coming. So any type of change that we want to see, we have to drive it. We have to affect it. We have to roll up our sleeves and do whatever we can. Get involved with organizations. If there is an organization that you want to set it up. Join with others, because no one has ever achieved anything on their own. So collaborate, form, work in coalition like we do. Find out who's doing what, and don't compromise on your values and principles for the sake of funding, I would say, and money, because the revolution would not be funded. All right. Good evening, everybody.
Beautiful, Zahra. Really appreciate your time. We're going to end it and wrap it up there. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who popped in and popped out. Thank you, Zahra, for coming on the live for the first time. And we're definitely going to get you back on, by the way. This isn't going to be your only one with us. Everybody have a lovely evening, and we will see you 8:30 Tuesday, every single Tuesday, for Let's Talk Education. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
See you. Thank you.
Zahra.